Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. So a couple of you have asked me to do this video ever since the round of WWE, and I laugh, but the round of WWE releases a couple of weeks ago to say, where do you think these guys are going to go? Or when it comes to Impact Wrestling, because I know a lot of you guys here on the channel, we talk about Impact Wrestling a lot. We talk about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, everything pro wrestling here on the channel. But there are a lot of Impact Wrestling fans here on the channel. So a couple of you guys have asked me, and do you think that, say, Karrion Kross or Keith Lee or Scarlett Bordeaux or Taya Valkyrie, are they going to be going back to Impact Wrestling? What are your thoughts? So I had planned on doing this video about the releases that came out on, when was it, November 4th, at the beginning of this month, a couple of weeks ago. But obviously, in the meantime, there's been yet another round of WWE releases. I mean, it's never ending. The budget cuts, and I use that term loosely, budget cuts continues to go on. And obviously, I've spoken about the budget cuts today. I've given my thoughts on that, the release of Hit Row, John Morrison, all that kind of stuff. It's on the channel, so be sure to check that out for my initial reactions about that. But when it pertains to Impact Wrestling, what names do I think could, and I say could, land in the world of Impact? Now, there are several names. A lot of them already have history with Impact Wrestling. Now, usually I would have a single graphic for each person, but because there is literally so many people that WWE have got rid of, it's just becoming more and more difficult to do that. So we'll keep this as more of sort of an open forum, and you can let me know, as always, your opinion in the comments section below. Really enjoy it when you guys interact with the videos. Let me know your thoughts. That's what it's all about here on the channel. It's about creating a community, creating a dialogue, a back and forth. And remember, everyone's got opinions. There's no such thing as a right or wrong opinion. I want to create a space where people are allowed to share their opinions and not have to worry about the consequences of it. So let's go back to this first lot of releases in November. I mean, it's not the first round of releases overall. WWE's been doing it all year. So the first name, Eva Marie. Do I think she's going to go in Impact Wrestling? Quickly, no. I don't see Eva Marie in any pro wrestling company that isn't WWE. To be honest, it was slightly surprising that she came back to WWE in the sense that she was never a good pro wrestler, ever. Her being a manager, I think, did have potential, but they never even went down really that route. They had the whole Doudrop. It was just a mess. And the whole Eva Marie thing, look, she's not going anywhere. She had her own thing, but even before she went back to WWE, she was in movies. Has a sizable social media following. I think she has her own fitness brand, fitness empire, if you will. So Eva Marie's not going to Impact Wrestling. So we can scratch that one off. Nia Jax, I mean, it was a surprising one in the sense that if you're connected to the Maivia Anoa'i family, like she is, given that she's the cousin of The Rock, one would think that maybe she was kind of bulletproof when it came to WWE. Reportedly, there might have been some things when it comes to vaccination status. There might have been something that she decided that she wanted to take an extended period of time off, a bit of a mental health break, which is absolutely her prerogative to do so. And WWE wanted her to come back in November. She said, I need more time off. The next thing she knows, she's released, which I find staggering, to be honest with you, because the way I look at that is that, again, she's bulletproof. She's part of the Anoa'i family. And given that they treated her like that, again, it makes you think that nobody is safe. As far as what do I see her doing, I don't think I can see her going to AEW, to be honest with you. The thing is with Nia Jax is she's a polarizing figure. But when it comes to Nia Jax, there's been lots of criticisms. I've spoken about her time and time again, and the criticisms of her is that she's reckless, she's dangerous, she's injured a lot of people, and some of those criticisms are valid. I think, and I've said this time and time again when it comes to Nia Jax, my thing was that I don't think she actually truly knows her own strength. And I think that's her problem in the ring, especially when she's going up against smaller talents, smaller opponents. She can be very reckless in the ring. You know what? I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule it out. I don't know if Nia Jax has any desire to go back into pro wrestling. When she was in NXT at the Performance Center, she broke all kinds of powerlifting records. She's a legitimate athlete. You might not look at Nia Jax and think athlete, but she is. And Impact Wrestling has been really, really good when it comes to the Knockouts division in bringing people in of all shapes and sizes and different styles. And it would be a bit of a coup, I think, for Impact Wrestling to bring in Nia Jax. But I think that's a name they would be really interested in. I really do. I think that, do we have currently in Impact Wrestling that big, dominating monster heel? Not really. I mean, previously they had Jessica Havoc, but she's not really, a single star at the moment. She was teaming with Rosemary. I think there's a place for Nia Jax in Impact Wrestling. I do. I could see her wrestling for Impact, certainly more than I could for, say, AEW. So I wouldn't rule that one out. I really wouldn't. Karrion Kross. Killer Kross, shall we say. Let's not call him Karrion Kross anymore. Obviously, with Karrion Kross comes Scarlett. They're it's not one without the other. They're coming together. Could I see them coming back to Impact Wrestling? Absolutely, I could. I have no doubts about it. Obviously, huge amount of history with the company. I don't want to say rose to prominence in Impact Wrestling because he was well known anyway, but certainly got more attention from his time in Impact. Of course, he was in plenty of other promotions as well, Lucha Underground. He appeared for AAA. The way that it kind of ended in Impact Wrestling might be a bit of an issue. Obviously, there was a bit of an issue when it came to contracts and getting released from Impact Wrestling. I recall is that ended a bit tumultuously, but that's the past, to be honest. And there's no doubt that Karrion Kross, Killer Kross, and Scarlett, they're money. They're absolutely money. They were money when they were in Impact. They were money wherever they've been. They were money in NXT. He was so misused and mismanaged in WWE. It's crazy. It really is. It's crazy, isn't it? How mismanaged he was during his time. Not in NXT, because he was booked very well in NXT. Now, obviously, some people are going to say, well, he had to lose at some point. And that's true. He did have to lose at some point. The booking of him coming into NXT and basically not losing for 18 months and beating everybody, putting over someone strong. But the point is the reason he was put over so strong is because they had massive plans for him. Remember when he first signed with WWE, he was going to be fast-tracked to the main roster. Yes, it got delayed a little bit because of the pandemic and because of the shoulder injury. But by the time he came to the main roster, he lost in his first match in 100 seconds to Jeff Hardy. It's madness. Absolute madness. So he's going to be one of those names that I really do think is just going to be how badly WWE missed the ball on that one. I think anywhere that he goes, Killer Kross goes and Scarlett goes in their post-WWE career, they'll be successful. Can I see them coming back to Impact? Absolutely I can. Do I think it's going to be their priority? No. I don't think it's the most likely place for Killer Kross and Scarlett to land. Obviously, they're well known, but I from what I've seen of them in terms of personality and interviews and stuff like that, you kind of get the impression they want to do something new and they want to do something different. They can always go back to Impact. Impact would be fortunate to have them. I could absolutely see Killer Kross and Scarlett showing up, or Scarlett Bordeaux showing up in AEW. I could see them certainly showing up in New Japan. They had a brief time in AAA in Mexico. I could absolutely see them going back there. As I mentioned before, can I see them going back to Impact? Sure. Do I think they will? I think them landing in an AEW or New Japan, I think is more likely, but I wouldn't rule that one out. Keith Lee. Yes, Keith Lee. Arguably with Karrion Kross in that first wave of releases at the beginning of the month, arguably that was the most surprising one. If you'd asked them early on in the year, would it have been the most surprising? Maybe not, because he was on the shelf for so long, but they just started the new gimmick, right? Bearcat Lee, and this was a guy a bit like Karrion Kross that so many people had high expectations of coming out of NXT, of being like, this guy can be a world champion, he can be WWE champion, he can be Universal champion. And I get there are some people that aren't necessarily Keith Lee believers. I get there are some people that think he's fat, or they think he's bland, or they don't like, whatever. And those people, in my opinion, this is my opinion, have just been brainwashed by Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard that a star looks a certain way, acts a certain way, and Keith Lee doesn't fit into that mold or anything like that. It's ludicrous. If you've seen Keith Lee do his thing in NXT, you could see that this guy is money. And people could say, well, that doesn't translate to the main roster. Then you would go, well, what the hell was Survivor Series in 2019? Because pretty much 2 years ago to right around this period of time, Keith Lee and Roman Reigns tore the house down in the Allstate Arena in Chicago. It was that 5-on-5-on-5 Survivor Series tag team match, Team Raw versus Team SmackDown versus Team NXT. The final two people in there, Roman Reigns, who is the biggest star in WWE and arguably pro wrestling right now, and Keith Lee. And Keith Lee not only took Reigns to the limit, but they had the crowd right there in the palm of their hands. And everyone at that time coming out of that match went, wow, Keith Lee is a star waiting to happen. And like with anything that comes from NXT into the main roster, is Vince McMahon does not care for what you did in NXT, what your gimmick is, what your character is. He sees you a certain way. You have to be that certain way. He never saw Keith Lee. He never saw the limitless Keith Lee. He saw Bearcat Lee, or he saw Keith Lee in a singlet covering up his belly, or they saw Keith Lee wearing these weird shorts and changing his music, all that kind of stuff. They were obsessed with changing Keith Lee, so much so that the Keith Lee that eventually was on Raw was so far removed from the Keith Lee that made him popular in NXT that he did feel bland, but that's because you ripped his identity away from him. What do you expect? Now, as far as Keith Lee's future, I think every single promotion, and I'm not exaggerating, I think every single promotion will make an offer to Keith Lee. Of course, Impact Wrestling, of course they will want Keith Lee, but also AEW will be desperate for Keith Lee. New Japan will be desperate for Keith Lee. The NWA will be desperate for Keith Lee. Anyone, AAA, you name it. There is a plethora of companies, old, new, and possibly ones that haven't even been founded yet, are going to be desperate to sign Keith Lee. Where do I think Keith Lee will land? I think he'll most likely land in AEW. I think that style suits him. I think there's a chip on his shoulder. I think there is, like with Karrion Kross, he is a guy that I think feels wronged by WWE. I think the fans feel wronged by WWE in a sense for him being let go. And I think AEW, he fits the mold of what I think AEW is looking for in the sense that, man, they really missed the boat on that one, but we can make money. We can make money. And there's certainly a plethora of names on the AEW roster that will be lobbying hard for Keith Lee to come into AEW. So, look, Impact obviously will want Keith Lee. Will he land in Impact? I think it's less likely. I think he shows up in AEW. But who knows what could happen there. Ember Moon. Now, this is one that I do think could land in Impact Wrestling. I do. I think it's going to be competitive between Impact and AEW for Ember Moon, because I think in the same vein as Keith Lee, I think that AEW will look at Ember Moon and think that's exactly the kind of person we're looking to add to the women's division. Women's division in AEW is getting better. It still has a long ways to go, in my opinion. I've been heavily critical of it for a long time. I do think they're making strides to improve it, but it's still nowhere near the level that it should be. In comparison, Impact Wrestling, you've got Mickie James, Mercedes Martinez, Deonna Purrazzo, the inspiration of the Knockouts Tag Team Champions. There's so many names in there that come in and out of the company, and the Knockouts division has always been a cornerstone, a pillar of Impact Wrestling's presentation. That goes all the way back to when Impact Wrestling founded their Knockouts division in 2007, 2008. They just had an all-women's pay-per-view in the Knockouts Knockdown. There is a huge commitment to Impact, and I think that Ember Moon and a lot of these females that have been released by WWE will have the decision of, do I want to go to AEW, where obviously the platform is bigger? And this goes for the men as well, but where the platform is bigger, but the emphasis on women's wrestling is lesser than it is in Impact? Or do I want to go to Impact where maybe the platform is smaller, but I can really prove the doubters wrong in the sense that I can have great matches that I'm probably just not going to be able to have in AEW because I might not get the opportunity to have them. Now, obviously, AEW is expanding its women's division. They've got the TBS Championship as well now, so that might attract an Ember Moon to come in. I think she would fit better, to be honest with you, in Impact, but I wouldn't be surprised, to be totally honest, if she does land in AEW, because I think, again, that's the type of name I think they'll be looking for. Frankie Monet, and I'm not going to call it that, it's Taya Valkyrie. Do I think Taya Valkyrie will come back to Impact? Now, that is a tough one. I don't know if I can see her landing in AEW, to be honest with you. I think she could come back to Impact Wrestling, and I think she probably should. That is the home. She's. Did she still hold the record as the longest reigning Knockouts champion, or was that surpassed by Deonna Purrazzo? I don't think it was. So Taya Valkyrie is still the longest reigning Knockouts champion in Impact Wrestling history. She's got so much history with that company, and there's no shame in going back either. I think that's important to state as well, because some people might be like, oh, it's such a failure going to WWE, getting released, and then you go back to Impact and you where you were 18 months ago. That's not a failure. Trey Miguel's the X Division champion. He turned down WWE and went back to Impact Wrestling. Taya Valkyrie, it might be the best thing for her. Go back to Impact, remind people what you were and what you once were, and prove all the doubters wrong. Taya Valkyrie, she got so badly mistreated by WWE, and I know that's a bit of a constant theme here, but it's true. The reason they let her go is because of her age. She's, 37, 38 years old, and WWE's got a youth movement, so she's suddenly out of place in NXT. The treatment of females with age is just laughable. If this was a male superstar, you wouldn't be looking at 37, 38, but you're so old, you're practically over. But because it's a woman, it's different. I think it's ridiculous. And I was very excited. I was very excited to see Taya Valkyrie go to WWE because I thought, one, I didn't think she should go to NXT. I thought she'd go straight to the main roster because of her experience. And I was excited because I've seen the great matches she had in Impact. And I think it's just a shame, as I mentioned, how she was treated. I really did. She had 12 matches, if that, in NXT. It's crazy. So I do think she'll go back to Impact. I do. I think it's more likely she goes back to Impact Wrestling than WWE. I really do. I'm going to skip BFAB because I'm going to talk about Hit Row in general. So we've got Gran Metalik and Lince Dorado. Absolutely, I could see them going to Impact. If anything, I think they're more likely to land in Impact Wrestling over your AEWs or the NWAs. I think it's likely they would compete in Mexico. But in the same vein, I guess, we have just seen the former Kalisto appear in AEW, so it's a possibility they could land in AEW. I think Gran Metalik would be the more likely one out of those to go to AEW because I do think the general consensus is there that he was underrated, had some good matches in WWE with the likes of Daniel Bryan and Rey Mysterio. But absolutely would be a fantastic addition to the X Division. I'd love to see a Trey Miguel versus Gran Metalik match for the X Division Championship. I mean, you kidding me? That would be unbelievable. So Gran Metalik, Lince Dorado, totally open for them to land in Impact Wrestling. Next, you have some of the NXT names, and I think these ones are quite miscellaneous. So we won't spend too long on them. Absolutely, they could end up in Impact, but I could also see them land in your NWAs, your MLWs, or just, play around the independent scene for a while. So Jesse Camilla, I mean, there's a possibility. Zayda Ramia, again, there's a possibility. Who knows? Trey Baxter, obviously, previously actually was in Impact Wrestling earlier in the year. What was funny with him was that he competed in the Super X Cup tournament back at Genesis earlier on in the year. Back in January of this year. Feels like a lifetime ago. So he was on television a lot, and it was quite surprising, wasn't it, when he got signed up by WWE, because it was like, oh, he really wasn't under contract with Impact Wrestling. He was just appearing at TV taping. So I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if at the next available opportunity he shows back up in Impact Wrestling. I think, if anything, that's quite likely. I mean, again, with these sort of smaller names, these smaller NXT names, you could absolutely see them appear on an episode of AEW Dark or Dark Elevation on a sort of a trial basis. But Trey Baxter, considering his history already with Impact, for me, logically, it makes sense that he would go back to Impact Wrestling. Katrina Cortez, Jeet Rama, again, I think it's difficult to say. Mia Yim's an interesting one. She did actually appear in Impact Wrestling previously. I think she might go to AEW, to be honest with you. I don't think it's necessarily dependent on where Keith Lee goes. I don't necessarily think it works like that. But I think she'll go to AEW because, again, I think that's kind of the profile of character that AEW is looking for right now. A bit of experience in there because they've got a lot of younger females, less inexperienced females. And I think Mia Yim would fit in there quite well. On the flip side of things, absolutely could see him coming into Impact. But I'm going to say AEW is more likely for Mia Yim. Harry Smith is just a bizarre story. Such a bizarre story, isn't it? That signed with WWE in April of this year, wasn't used at all. The plan was for him to go to the NXT UK brand and feud with Walter. Obviously, that didn't happen because of the pandemic, but they must have known that at the time when they signed him, which, again, I find odd. So that was the plan, and then WWE returns to the road. He wrestles in a dark match, does a social media interview backstage. Never saw him again. At one point, I think he tested positive for COVID, but just they had nothing for him. They just signed him for no reason. And it goes to show that the left hand has no idea what the right hand is doing. As far as where he would go next, and he did a lot of work in Japan, didn't he? For All Japan, I think. Might have done some New Japan stuff as well. So, could he go to Impact? I mean, it's a possibility. I could see him going to AEW. I think the Jericho connection there might prove quite beneficial. So I could see him going to AEW. Oney Lorcan, absolutely 100% could see him going to Impact Wrestling. I think he fits very well, actually. And I think he will go to Impact, to be honest with you. Again, I think he's the type of name that maybe if he went to AEW, he'd be on Dark Elevation, but he probably wants to be more of a spotlight than that, and that's why I think Impact Wrestling would probably be the right place for Oney Lorcan, the former NXT Tag Team Champion. So I think that's where he'll probably go. We'll get on to the names that were released yesterday as well, because again, there's just so many departures from WWE at the moment. So the big sort of surprising one yesterday, of course, was Hit Row, that being Top Dollar, Isaiah Swerve Scott, Ashante the Adonis, and of course previously, before that, B-Fab. It looks to me like that they're going to try and stick together as a faction. I've got my sort of opinions on Top Dollar. I had my opinions on him from that, what was it called? The Lost and Found show on A&E, Hidden Treasures, whatever it was, when they were looking for memorabilia or whatever. He was playing a character on their reality shows. Have nothing to do with reality anymore. They're completely scripted. But Top Dollar, I saw his tweets like everyone else, and I just rolled my eyes like everyone else. Remember when he said, like, we're not the Shield? No, we're better than the Shield. Or don't worry about the main roster transition. We can promo. We'll be fine. They were gone a month later. Like, talk about things that were aging badly. I thought that was ridiculous. I think that Hit Row will probably remain as a faction, to be honest with you. Will they be called Hit Row? Of course not. They'll be called something else. But I think the plan will probably be for them to remain as a faction, or for at least a couple of them to remain as a faction. And I think they'll go to AEW. I think, again, they've got so much already notoriety, and they've got so much popularity. And again, the shock that people had that they were released, and the surprise that people had that they were released caught everyone off guard. And I think Tony Khan, historically, in the same vein as like a Malachi Black or whoever, has looked at that and said, man, I can do something with them. I can absolutely do something with them. Their money. And again, like when Hit Row, now that they've been released, it feels like WWE have just offered up money on a silver platter. That's how crazy it is. So I could see Hit Row landing, to be honest, in AEW. On the flip side of things, if Hit Row managed to sign with Impact Wrestling, first of all, unbelievable signing it would be. And Isaiah Swerve Scott, I wouldn't pigeonhole him for an X Division Championship. I think in Impact, he can be world champion. It might be a bit of a bold statement, but I think absolutely he could be a world champion. I just think that AEW is going to probably make him and the rest of his faction a strong offer. The next one was John Morrison. Now, I spoke about this one earlier, that in the sense, it wasn't a total surprise, in the sense that once Taya Valkyrie was released, it kind of went, well, there's a possibility Morrison could go. I feel bad for John Morrison because I, like many Impact fans, saw him in Impact be a world champion, be a viable main eventer. Johnny Mundo, obviously I saw him in Lucha Underground, and again, saw that this guy can be a main eventer. He's money, one of the best workers on the roster. Obviously, one of the problems previously with John Morrison, whatever you want to call him, was his promos, but I think they've improved immensely. I think you go watch a promo that he did as Johnny Impact in Impact Wrestling, not a bad promo there. In WWE, the material sucked, but he always delivered it very well. He was just given this goofy gimmick with a dripstick. It's not his fault, you know? So I felt bad for him in that sense. In the same vein that I think Taya Valkyrie is likely to come back to Impact Wrestling, I think Johnny Impact's likely to come back to Impact Wrestling as well. Could I see him landing in AEW? Of course I could. But I think that Impact Wrestling, of course, there are so many names to pick and choose from here that they'll be making offers to. And of course, they'll want to bring in Keith Lee, Karrion Kross. But I think they have to almost kind of pick their battles in the ones that are likely they think to come in. And if you think about it, you know, it's such a quick win for them to bring in Taya Valkyrie and Johnny Impact, in the vein that former champions, they've got, you know, recognition with the Impact Wrestling fans, they've got history with the Impact Wrestling promotion, they can slot right into the main events of their respective divisions, and it works. Johnny Impact versus Moose is a great Impact pay-per-view main event. Taya Valkyrie versus Mickie James is a great Impact main event. They're quick wins immediately. I think Impact Wrestling right now, to be honest, are probably licking their lips thinking, man, the names, the free agents on the market right now, that especially speak to them, whether it is, Johnny Impact, Taya Valkyrie, Karrion Kross, Keith Lee, still Bray Wyatt, still Braun Strowman, Hit Row, the Mia Yim, the list goes on and on. So, of course, they'll be very excited about that. But I think Johnny Impact's likely to land in Impact Wrestling. I really do, over AEW. The next name was Tegan Knox. I sympathize for her massively because she was very popular in NXT. Of course, had 2 horrible knee injuries. Got called up to the main roster finally. Teams up with Shotzi Blackheart in a tag team. Shotzi obviously won over those in Power. She's now a single star on SmackDown. Tegan Knox was drafted to Raw, and they did nothing with her. She was released. I think she'll do fine. That's a tough one. Again, it's a real tough one because I think women's wrestling is not as simple as it is when it comes to male wrestling, when it comes to choosing between AEW or Impact or any other promotion. I think Tegan Knox will be fine. Something in my head says I think she'll more likely land in AEW, but she'd be a fantastic addition to the Impact Wrestling roster, but I think she'll land in AEW. Drake Maverick, I think, will come back to Impact Wrestling, as he should. Rockstar Spud has to return. And credit to him, look, he made his name in Impact. He was part of the British Boot Camp first season. I remember that on Challenge TV. I watched that. And he stood out then. Look, he's not a big guy, obviously, but he's got a ton of personality. And he was there in Impact Wrestling's dark days, and he was a shining light. His partnership with EC3, even the goofy stuff he'd do with Dixie Carter and the loud suits and all that kind of stuff. I remember all the great stuff he had, and cashing in, his Feast or Fired briefcase, all that kind of stuff. I think it makes sense for him to go back to Impact. I would wonder if he kind of portrays the same kind of character that he did previously, if he went back to Impact Wrestling, in the sense that he would still probably be Rockstar Spud, but would he be the same version, or would he try and be a more serious version? Like he kind of tried to do in NXT this time round. What I would argue about that is I kind of had, as a viewer I'm talking about here, I think you have to stick to your strengths. I didn't have a lot of interest in seeing serious Drake Maverick, to be honest with you, in NXT. I enjoyed the story of him re-signing with the company last year and all that kind of stuff, but I kind of have a preference to see Rockstar Spud, the old Rockstar Spud, over the newer Drake Maverick in Impact Wrestling. But I think Impact's the most likely destination for him, to be honest with you. Shane Thorne, I think he'll go to Impact. I don't think he'll go to AEW. I think he'd be a great addition to the X division in Impact Wrestling. It's a shame. It's a shame. Like, Shane Thorne's a very talented guy. Remember back on Raw, this was like June or May, maybe, in the pandemic last year, where MVP was randomly the new manager of Shane Thorne, and I don't even know who his tag team partner was, but times change quickly, and it's difficult to get that retribution stink off of you, unfortunately, and Shane Thorne suffered because of that. But he's one of those names that when he was released by WWE last night, I thought, well, good for him, because he's just going to thrive because of it. It's certainly better than sitting on the sidelines doing nothing, isn't it? And finally, Jackson Riker. Now, it's interesting when we talk about Jackson Riker here, isn't it? Because obviously he has a lot of connections to Impact Wrestling. The former Gunner. I remember watching an episode of Impact back in the day. This would have been 2011-ish. He beat Sting. He F5 Sting and beat him when Gunner was getting a big push. Obviously, ton of heat when it comes to Jackson Riker. Deservedly so, by the way. As I mentioned earlier on, when I did the video earlier on, obviously I don't agree with what he said, and obviously what policies and politics he supports. That's not my deal. But I'm not going to celebrate anyone losing their job. I think there was absolutely an argument in that there were names that were getting released that deserved to stay in their job over him. But he was on borrowed time, it looks like, anyway. Where do I think he'll go next? I don't know if he'll go to Impact Wrestling, to be honest with you, even though he has history there. I could see him going somewhere like the NWA. I think they don't really care about that kind of stuff, any baggage that you have. Tyrus was the television champion. He might still be a television champion. I don't really keep up with the NWA that much. So I could see him going to the NWA, but Who knows? But the fact that there are so many names to get through there, it's obviously going to be a really exciting time to be a fan of Impact Wrestling, because there's going to be lots of names linked with the company going forward. And of course, when they are, we'll discuss it, we'll break it down, we'll try and keep you as up to date as possible here on the channel. So be sure to like and subscribe, bottom right hand corner. Look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on this these names? Where do you think they're going to land next? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash the like on the like button too. Really just help us out here on YouTube, got the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.